All right. Good morning, everyone. I bet you didn't think you were coming back to math class today, but so last night I did a video kind of talking about bullet construction a little bit and different ways of balancing them. We're going to talk about another component of that right now, which is going to be the twist rate and velocity. Which, when you combine the twist rate and your forward velocity, you get your bullet RPM, which is kind of an interesting number to think about. But so most common barrel twists that you can buy, like in an off the shelf rifle or whatever, you're gonna see barrel twists that are gonna be like 1 in 12, 1 in 10. Don't really see 1 in 11. Don't know why, but most generally either is, if it's going to go between 12 and 10, it just goes from 12 to 10. Sometimes you'll see a 1 in 9. 1 in 8's getting pretty common, and then 1 in 7 is pretty common with the guys that shoot 5.56. So I've had a conversation with a buddy of mine a couple times, and he swears up and down that his 1 in 7 twist barrel is just really like slinging rounds out of it in his AR. He's got a 20-inch 1 in 7 twist, like custom barrel on there, and he like claims that the I don't guess he really claims, just for lack of knowledge, he claims that the barrel twist, because it's 1 in 7 and not a 1 in 8 or a 1 in 10, increases the amount of energy the bullet output. But that's just really not the case. So with that, we'll compare a 1 in 7 to a 1 in 8 here with the barrel twist. So to calculate your bullet RPM, you need your muzzle velocity multiplied times 720, and that's going to give you X. You're going to take X and you're going to divide it by your twist rate, and that's going to equal your RPM. So, and the part of the twist rate that they're really wanting to know here is this last number. What is that? 12 inches, 10 inches, 9 inches, 8 inches, 7 inches, etc. So, now one thing I will say, and the reason why it's apparent that that barrel is slinging rounds downrange harder and hitting the targets harder when they hit steel, is that it's a 20-inch barrel. And compare that to, say, a regular 16-inch barrel, or if you're running an SBR that has like a 10-inch barrel or something. So the 20-inch versus the 16-inch, you are going to get more forward velocity out of that. It's just physics with the internal ballistics there. So say if you're running a 77 grain open tip match out of a 16-inch barrel, you're probably going to be getting about 2,750, maybe 2,800 foot per second, depending on who loaded the ammunition and how the gas is set on your rifle, and how much gas bleed off it is to reciprocate the bolt carrier. But it's going to be somewhere in that range. Versus a 20-inch barrel, that extra 4 inches of barrel length, you're probably actually going to gain somewhere around 150 feet per second. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but about 150. So if you're running 2750 in the 16, you can expect to run close to 2900 in that 20-inch barrel. So let's say you've got a normal 1 in 8 twist barrel, and we're running in a 16-inch barrel, let's say, and let's see what our bullet RPM is in that. So we're going to take our 2750 for the 16-inch barrel, we're going to multiply that by 720. That's going to give us 1.98 million. 1.98 million, so 1,980,000, and we're going to divide that by 8, and that's going to give us, so a 1, 8, and then a 16-inch, or just we'll just do it at the speed. 2750 is going to be 247,500 RPM. Now, that's how fast the bullet is spinning. It's spinning one time every 8 inches downrange out of the barrel, and it's going 2,750 feet per second. So, if you do the math correctly, it's 247,500 RPM as soon as it leaves the barrel. All right, now let's see what happens if we change that to a 1 in 7 twist. So we're going to take 2750, multiply that by the 720, and we're going to divide it by 7. Oops, here we go. Now, we're going to do 1 in 7 at 2750 is 282,857.1 RPM. So, going from a 1 in 8 to a 1 in 7 and not changing the forward velocity, we're keeping this in a 16-inch barrel, you're going to get 282,857.1 revolutions per minute on your projectile when it leaves. So it's going about, 35,000 RPM higher, a little more than that, about 35,357 more RPM. Now, in his case, comparing a 20-inch barrel, probably running about 2,900 feet per second in a 1 in 7. So we'll do 1 in 7 at 2,900. So 2,900 times 720 divided by 7. Now this is 29,285.7. So we did, when we went from the 16-inch in at a 1 in 8 twist to a 20-inch in 1 in 7, our RPM went up about 50,000 RPM. Actually, a little more than that. So a little over 50,000 RPM, more revolutions per minute. So it does have more rotational velocity, more bullet RPM. But the main kicker is the reason why it hits harder on target is the forward velocity. That's the real kicker there. That's what really puts more energy on target, is the speed. So if we calculate the speed out and calculate the amount of energy on target, which I'll do that real quick. All right, so if we take our 20 or 77 grain and we launch it out of our 16-inch barrel, we're going to get, at 2750 muzzle velocity, we're going to get 1,292 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So that's the amount of energy at the muzzle, not the amount of energy that's on target, because when we shoot, as soon as that bullet leaves the barrel, the velocity starts decaying very rapidly. Now, depending on what the ballistic coefficient is, your 77 grain is going to retain more speed for a longer distance than, say, like a varmint bullet that's short and smaller, like a 35 grain or a 45 grain varmint bullet. And that just has to do with bullet shape and construction, the length of the bullet, and everything in relation to its diameter or cross section. But it's a whole other conversation there. So the important thing to know is it's got 1,292 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, and that is irregardless of whether it's in a 1 in 8 or a 1 in 7. If it leaves the muzzle at that speed, that's how much muzzle energy it has. It doesn't have anything to do with how fast the bullet is spinning. So now when we go to the 77 grain in the 20-inch barrel, we get 2,900. Now we are at 1,437 foot-pounds of energy. So that's where your extra power comes from. That's the reason why it seems like when it hits the target, it's hitting harder, is because it actually is, because it's coming out of a longer barrel. So when it hits that steel target and it sounds different and it moves the target more, this is the reason why, is because you got about 140 foot-pounds more energy leaving the muzzle, which is going to stay relatively the same all the way down the range. At any range, like say when we get to 100 yards, it may be, this is at 1,000 foot-pounds, it's going to be about 1140 or so. You know, it's going to have it's going to have more energy. Now, we could run it through a ballistic calculator. We could put the ballistic coefficient in, our muzzle velocity, and our altitude and air density and all that stuff, and we could run a ballistic chart for the 2750 all the way out to say 500 or even 1,000 yards, and we can see exactly how much energy the bullet has at any given yard range, at any given distance, and then we could compare that to the same 77 grain at 2,900, and you're going to see that at every distance on the way out to, even out to 1,000 yards, this is going to have more energy on target. And it doesn't have anything to do with how fast it's spinning, okay? It has to do with muzzle velocity, forward speed, and therefore more kinetic energy there. So now some of you guys may be wondering, well, you may have seen those new real heavy subsonic custom rounds like the 338 Razorback, or I believe, or the 8.6 Blackout, or the I think there's another one like 338 Arc or something like that, where they're running a 300 grain 338 caliber bullet, but they're running them subsonic. Now the issue with that is that 300 grain bullet, like if you're running a 300 grain Berger open tip match, like I used to run in my 338 Lapua. Here, I actually have one here. But this would be a 338 Lapua round, and that's your 300 grain open tip match. So if you're running that in a normal big rifle with a lot of power, like in my 338 that I used to have, I would run that round at about 2950 out of the muzzle, and being a 300 grain bullet, and that bullet I believe requires a 1 in 8 or a 1 in 9 twist to stabilize it, but that's at normal bullet speed. That's at normal, like 2,700 plus feet per second from the muzzle. Now, if you were to take that bullet and try to stabilize it at a very low velocity, let's say 1,000 feet per second, because you're wanting to run it subsonic. See, because I was normally running them at 2,950, so we would take, 2,950, and my barrel had a 1 in 8 twist, so times 720 divided by 8, it's running 265,500 RPM. So it was so 265,500 RPM. All right, and that was how, that was the RPM that bullet was leaving the muzzle on my particular rifle, running the speed that I was running with them. Now, if we take that same bullet and we stick it and we slow it down to subsonic range, let's say 1,050, because that's pretty normal for subsonic, like for a true subsonic, You could argue that anything under the sound barrier is subsonic, but the sound barrier also is dependent on altitude and air density. So, like in my particular area, I think it's like 1,128 feet per second, give or take, if we're in what type of weather's going on, whether there's a low pressure front coming in or a high pressure or whatever. But about 1,128 feet per second. Now, if we want to make sure we're running subsonic, 1050 is a good place to go. So 1,050 feet per second times 720, and then we're going to divide that by a normal, like 1 in 8 twist. We're going to get 94,500 RPM. Now, this is kind of an issue. So all we did was reduce the speed all the way down to 1,000 feet per second, and we lost about 170,000 RPM. And so the bullets are kind of like a spinning top. You know, initially, right when you spin it, it's got the most rotational speed, and it's going to be the most stable there. So what happens is when you slow that bullet down to subsonic and you're running the same twist rate and you get it below a certain RPM and it's going, only a certain forward speed, it's going to lose its stability. And that bullet is going to wobble and do the same thing a spinning top does when it starts to slow down and get below a certain RPM, is that it starts wobbling and getting all crazy and doing weird stuff, and then it finally just falls over on its side, right? So the same thing is going to happen with your bullet once you get it below a certain RPM. Now, I'm not going to claim to know everything about this, but 94,500 RPM for that particular projectile is not enough RPM to stabilize it. So the solution for running your very large, heavy bullet in a very slow cartridge is to increase the twist rate. And so they've come out with like a 1 in 3 twist barrel. Some of them are running a 1 in 3, and this is to compensate for our low velocity. So let's see what happens. 1050 times 720, and we're going to divide that by 3. Now we're back up there, 252,000 RPM. Okay, so you see how that put us back up to where we're close to where we were in the 1 in 8. So we're running 252,000 RPM now, and that bullet is now stabilized. So if you're going to run super big bullets subsonic, you're going to need more twist rate to stabilize them. You know, and of course the bullet shape does have a lot to do with this. They could construct the bullet in a way, increase the amount of bearing surface or whatever they could do to it to increase the amount of engagement from the rifling and stuff, and maybe that'll help. But generally, like when you increase a bullet's weight, you're not increasing the diameter, you're increasing the length. And so the bullets only get longer if, and this is per caliber. I mean, if it's a .338 caliber, it's a .338 caliber. Whether it's a 200 grain bullet or a 300 grain bullet. So the only thing that's different is the bullet's length. And so the longer they get, typically you need more twist rate to stabilize them. And you also could use more speed to stabilize them. And that's the thing too, is the older, like 5.56 barrels were typically either 1 in 12 or 1 in 10 back in the day, and not 5.56 actually, 223. They were 1 in 12 or 1 in 10 because they were really loaded for like varmint rounds, and so the biggest bullet that anyone ever run in a 223 was really either like a 50, 55, sometimes 45 grain or 40 grain bullet, and they're running real high velocity, but they didn't need, because it's a shorter bullet, they didn't need as much twist rate to stabilize it. So, but they're running, 3,200, 3,300 feet per second with those lighter bullets, and they were using them for varmint hunting basically. Now, when the military adopted the 5.56, they wanted to go to a heavier bullet, but the issue with running a normal barrel, a 1 in 12 or 1 in 10 twist, is that with the heavier bullet, they had less forward velocity and therefore less RPM, and so they weren't achieving enough RPM to actually stabilize those heavier, like 62 grain or 77 grain bullets. And so the solution for that is to go to a 1 in 8 or 1 in 7. So it's pretty common if you buy a 223 chambered rifle that it's gonna have like either a 1 in 12 or 1 in 10 twist, especially if it's a little older, say 20 or 30 years old. But versus buying a 5.56 rifle, you are going to see it's going to be pretty common for you to have one in a 1 in 8. Now, 1 in 7 is starting to come around. There are some companies building 1 in 7 twist barrels, and like you'll see with a 5.56, if you're running a pistol length barrel, like a 10-inch or so, you'll see more of those in 1 in 7 than you will in 1 in 8. And the reason why is because you're getting less forward speed, and so you need more twist rate to keep your stability going versus running a normal rifle length barrel where the 1 in 8 is totally fine. So that's about, I think, all there is for me to say about twist rate and forward velocity and all that, and some good examples there. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and we will see you next time in the next video. Thanks for watching.